Many people are curious about the reality of Buddhism that is rapidly spreading in the West, with millions joining each year. After having more than 500 million followers, Buddhism is the fourth most popular religion on the planet. It has a cult that defies explanation. Some of them embalm themselves while still alive, and others walk on hot coals. Who is the Buddha, referred to as the Enlightened One? And what connection does he have with Islam? Is he really the prophet of al-Kifl, or simply a philosopher who expresses beliefs and hypotheses about the nature of the universe? What is the real story behind the atheist philosopher who denied the existence of God, but made no claims to prophecy or divinity? He was ranked fourth among the most influential people in history by author Michael H. Hart in his book, The 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history. After years of meditation, he finally understood the causes of human suffering and how to find happiness. And all of his teachings were summed up in one concept: asceticism and austerity. If you want to discover more about the Buddha and whether he was a real person or a fictional legend, join us as we learn more facts by watching this video. To begin, you should be aware that Buddha is not a person's name, but rather a religious or philosophical title, referring to an enlightened person, despite the fact that the British mission conducted research to determine the truth. Is it a symbol for Buddhists or a real personality who existed thousands of years ago? However, researchers and historians have so far differed in opinions. Some of them believe that Buddha is just a legend, and a large number of them gave the title of Buddha to 5 people who lived in India for many centuries. We will shed light on the most authentic narrative supported by reliable sources. According to what Buddhists agreed upon, his real name was Siddhartha Gautama, and his mother's name was Queen Mahamaya. But just 7 days after the birth, Queen Mahamaya passed away. The Buddha lived in a small kingdom just below the Himalayan foothills. His father was a chief of the Shakya clan. It is said that 12 years before his birth, Brahmins predicted that he would become either a universal monarch or a great sage. Since his father wanted a powerful ruler in their kingdom, Gautama was raised in princely luxury, within the palace walls protected from the outside world. They surrounded him with every kind of pleasure, entertained by dancing girls, educated by Brahmins, and trained in archery, swordsmanship, wrestling, swimming, and running. At the age of 16, Siddhartha wed the lovely Princess Yasodhara, who would eventually bear him a son. At that time, it was necessary to compete in order to win her hand, as his father rejoiced at his prowess in the competitions and hoped she would bind him to family life. At the age of 29, he was suddenly confronted with impermanence and suffering. On a rare trip, he came across a desperately ill person. The next day, he saw a decrepit old man, and finally, a dead person. He was devastated because his luxurious life prevented him from knowing old age, disease, and death. Therefore, he wanted to search for the secret of suffering, to put an end to it. And that was the start of the fulfillment of the prophecy that his father tried to disprove. One night, he left the palace along with his attendant, Channa. After going some distance, he discarded his royal robes and ornaments, giving them to Channa, and then cut off his hair and became an ascetic. With these actions, Siddhartha Gautama joined a large group of men who had left the Indian society in search of liberation. There were many different methods and teachers, and Gautama looked into many of them, including atheists, materialists, and idealists. Unlike in our time, the deep forest and teeming marketplace were alive with the sounds of thousands of arguments and opinions. Siddhartha practiced austerities and concentration for 6 years. He pushed himself mercilessly, consuming only 1 grain of rice per day, pitting mind against body. His ribs protruded from his wasted flesh, and he appeared more dead than alive. He preceded all teachers in reaching states of unconsciousness. Then he began to experiment with austerity in its extreme limits. Then he curbed all the desires of his body until he was close to death. So he was finally convinced of the need to choose the middle path. One evening, Siddhartha sat beneath the pudding fig tree, which is now known as the Bodhi tree in Bodh, Gaya, India. He made a promise to himself that he wouldn't leave until he had found the truths he was seeking. Siddhartha finally found the answers to the questions to end human suffering that he had been searching for many years. Through right livelihood, right view, right effort, right concentration, right intention, right mindfulness, right action, and right speech. These actions form the eight-sided Dharma wheel, one of the four truths of Buddhism. The other three truths are: the suffering is inevitable, that human beings suffer because they are prisoners of desire, and that freedom results from freedom of desire. The Buddha said that supreme and unsurpassed enlightenment had come to him only after the realization of these four truths, and he was then called Buddha, the Awakened One, or the Enlightened One. Buddhists believe that after death, a person will be reborn as something else. What they reincarnate as is determined by their actions in their previous life. And over many lifetimes, humans go through an unknown number of cycles of rebirth. Skillful actions lead to a good rebirth, and unskillful actions lead to a bad rebirth. Buddhists believe that the human realm is the best one to be in if they want to reach enlightenment. After his enlightenment, Buddha traveled on foot throughout northern India to disseminate his philosophies and teachings. The Buddha met two merchants on his journey, Tapasa and Phalika, who became his first disciples. Soon after, 5 of his friends who wanted to reach enlightenment believed in him and formed the first Sangha, the Buddhist monastic community. The circle of followers who were successful in reaching the Buddha's experience grew, and the number in the Sangha reached over 1,000 monks. Buddha traveled throughout India for the next 45 years of his life, sharing his teachings with a wide range of people, including nobles, religious devotees, street sweepers, murderers, and cannibals. According to legend, the Sangha faced much opposition and dissension even during the Buddha's lifetime. For example, Devadatta, Gautama's cousin, who had become a monk, attempted to kill him several times. Initially, Devadatta asked the Buddha to step aside and allow him to lead the Sangha. When he failed, it is said that Devadatta tried to make a deal with some archers, but when they encountered Buddha, they put their bows down and decided to become his followers rather than killing him. Buddha was not a prophet, nor a religious man, but rather a researcher, philosopher, and thinker, who was more concerned with the moral aspects and noble principles, therefore dismissing the doctrinal aspects, as the Buddha mocked the concept of God because human souls are subject to permanent transformation and constant annihilation. The Buddha believed in the doctrine of reincarnation because it is a result of the principle of karma. He was said to have been asked once whether he was a god, an angel, or a saint by his followers. "No," he answered, "I am the awakened, enlightened." Some believe that the prophet al-Kifl, who is mentioned twice in the Quran, refers to Gautama Buddha, whereas the majority of scholars consider al-Kifl to be the prophet Ezekiel. And according to Professor Abdul Qadir's book, that the fig tree mentioned in Surat al-Tin from the 1st to the 5th verses is also a reference to Buddha, because Buddha attained enlightenment under the fig tree. As I previously stated, over the period of more than 2,000 years, numerous accounts of the existence of the Buddha were written, and many historians believed it to be nothing more than a myth. In 1890, a British mission discovered an old Brahmin manuscript, written in an ancient colloquial language, and this proved that Buddha is a real personality, as the place was called Lumbini, where Buddha was raised. Buddha died at the age of 80 in 480 BC in his extreme contemplative state, entering the immortal state of nirvana. as his body was burned by his followers and his ashes were scattered to 8 citizens in areas where Buddhism had spread. Until now, there is no doubt that Buddha was an important figure. As for the world's largest statue of Buddha, it is located in the city of Leshan in China. The area where the giant statue is located has been listed as a World Heritage Site since 1990 by UNESCO. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Let us know what you think down in the comments below, and thank you for watching.